Murphy on the line for Bucknuts to talk Ohio State football with the Buckeyes at #1 in the country. That statement obviously made by the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Pat, that Ohio State has the best team. They have the best team. They've proven it. All three phases of the game, playing complete games, start to finish, dominating everyone. Maybe played their weakest game the first week of the season. And since then have just rolled and gotten better and better and better, regardless of the competition. And a little nugget that a lot of people discovered, I think, and surprised some people, that the strength of schedule is actually higher than LSU's overall.
Yeah, that was surprising when I heard that, because I thought, going into the college football playoff rankings announcement on Tuesday, that they would have LSU #1. Now, watching Ohio State week in and week out, to me, they looked like the best team in the country. And that's frankly what it came down to for the committee. They, combined the eye test with a lot of the metrics and, determined Ohio State was ahead of LSU. LSU certainly has a chance to flip that this weekend. A win over Alabama, I have to imagine, would, especially on the road, would, give them that strength of schedule, strength of record. But, I think it's just the way Ohio State has looked, as you mentioned. That first game against FAU week 1, where they come out to a 28-0 lead and then let FAU back in the game and still end up winning by 24 points. But it was definitely not the dominant performances that we started to see that next week against Cincinnati, where they win 42-0 and then go on the road to Indiana and win 51-10, I think it was, and so on and so forth. And that 24-point margin against FAU was the smallest of the season for Ohio State. So it's just been that game control that the committee's talked about in the past, and just looking the part. We've seen them, talk about the likes of Alabama and Clemson when maybe they haven't played the toughest schedule, but you're rolling through teams week after week. That was one of the reasons that they docked Clemson this year, was because, they hadn't looked until recently like the, top team that they were expected to be coming into the season. Obviously they had the close call against UNC, but even in some of the other games, they just didn't look as dominant as some of the other teams in college football. And the committee decided they were #5. So the way you do it, the way you get to 8-0 at this point in the season certainly matters. And the committee proved that. Again, like I said, I won't be surprised if LSU jumps Ohio State, assuming they beat Alabama. Frankly, I won't be surprised if Alabama defeating LSU with Tua Tagovailoa, a little banged up. If they jump from 3-1 in next week's rankings, the committee is supposed to each week start with a blank slate. So if you look at the resumes there, it might pan out that way. But through 9 weeks of play, Ohio State was considered the best team. But as Ryan Day has said before the rankings came out, and since then, the only rankings that really matter to them are the rankings at the end of the season. They're focused on not letting that be something that gets into their heads. They want to, just go out and continue doing or handling their business as they have all season. And, that'll be the way to hold on to, the top 1, 2, 3, or 4 spots is just keep winning convincingly, look the part, and frankly, just don't show any weaknesses. And that's something they've done well all season.
Christmas is coming, folks. Shop Amazon. Grab the link in the description section below. It's the same shopping experience. Doesn't cost you any more money, but you help us build the channel. We got Pat Murphy on the line for Bucknuts, 247 sports platform for Ohio State football. Please join him and the rest of the staff right there. The brand 247 Sports, so lock it in right there. 52-51 was the score against Maryland last year. The Terps looked strong down the finish last year, came into this season, played 2 lights-out games. The Syracuse win has been compromised based on the Orange not being very good as other people thought that they were going to be at that point. And the Terps are just not playing good football. That's all there is to it. So the 52 from last year may carry over to 2019. The 51 on the Maryland side would be a shock to all of us if that translates to the 2019 Ohio State defense.
Yeah, that game last year that you mentioned was one of the strangest games I've ever been a part of covering. Just Maryland played lights out. Ohio State's defense, which had been suspect all year, hardly showed up, allowing big play after big play. Fortunately for Ohio State, they had Dwayne Haskins, who was remarkable in that game. J.K. Dobbins as well. So, in overtime, but that's a failed 2-point conversion away from being a loss for Ohio State, and really a fortunate 2-point conversion failure too, because Maryland did not execute great on that play. But looking at this year, you summed it up pretty well. This is not a good Maryland team, despite how they looked early in the season. Only one win since that Syracuse win that you mentioned, and that was against Rutgers, who is the only team in the Big Ten that I would say is worse than Maryland. So on paper, Ohio State should go out and this should be an easy one. Get the starters out of the game, early third quarter. Ryan Day tends to like to keep them in to get them reps, but I don't imagine that they will need a ton of them in this one. I try and look each week at what could test Ohio State, and Maryland does have some weapons. We saw McFarland last year run for big gains, but he just hasn't looked the same. I don't think this year. So it wouldn't surprise me if maybe Maryland is able to move the ball in the second half when some of the second string defensive players come into the game, but I can't see this one staying close. I imagine Ohio State gets out to a big start and just rolls through it. And it'll be interesting too, if with the Chase Young news, how that could possibly galvanize the team, especially the defense. I mentioned some of the young defensive ends that are going to get an opportunity this week. How do they take advantage? And, does the linebackers have to step up in the secondary and so on and so forth? Chase Young obviously makes the defense a lot easier for this team with the way he can get to a quarterback, and just the fact that the quarterback and the offensive line have to be so aware of him. So who steps up? How do they kind of rally around this disappointment? But, it shouldn't matter, frankly, and no disrespect to Maryland, but they just don't have the same kind of weapons, the same type of depth that Ohio State does. I expect this one to be a rather easy win for the Buckeyes.
Ohio State fans will get a look at former Buckeye Keandre Jones, who has become one of the better players in the Big Ten at linebacker, and certainly a player that Maryland needs. And again, he's their leader on defense, makes the most disruptive plays. You mentioned Anthony McFarland. I don't remember the yardage total, but it was insane last year against Ohio State, 285, 290, whatever he racked up on the ground. He's at 4.9 per carry and 7 touchdowns. His running mate in the backfield, Javon Leake, at 7.7. He's the only one that found the end zone against Michigan. That was on special teams and a kickoff return. And the Maryland quarterback situation has been abysmal for years and years and years. Josh Jackson, after a nice 15-game run at Virginia Tech, leading them to a 10-4 season, and then a few more games before he lost his job due to injury, moves to Maryland. You would think that he would have been an upgrade, but he's been pretty bad since the Syracuse game as well. 49% completion percentage. Pat Murphy on the line, breaking down Ohio State football for us on a regular basis. The Buckeyes have Maryland at noon in the shoe. The point spread's 43, 44 points, something in that range, which is crazy for a Big Ten game these days, outside of Rutgers, of course. But Maryland has reached those depths, apparently, and I'm certainly not going to touch that line, because the Buckeyes could blow that out very easily, or they could just put it in cruise control and win, let's say, 49-7. There you go. So I would stay far, far away. All right, Pat, we appreciate you stopping by, and enjoy the game.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, Pat, thank you so much.
Sure thing.